It's interesting. So I've been involved with the growth of attention metrics since about 2019. I was responsible for publishing one of the first white papers around attention metrics with Karen Nelson Field at the time. It was interesting to understand where they came from. There was a real feeling that increasingly agencies and advertisers were optimizing to the wrong things. There's a race to the bottom on pricing for media, so just buying impressions cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and saying, we'll guarantee you outcomes. But the quality of people's experience with advertising was massively declining. So if you look at, I think, websites in particular, so digital display, so many of them now want to satisfy that incentive that agencies and advertisers have given them, which is to say, I want cheap reach. And if you go on any major news website, for example, you'll see that's exactly what they've done. They've piled ads in that people don't really look at, don't people pay attention to, but that somewhere in a KPI framework, someone will say that was effective, it drove a click, it drove a conversion or a sale. So the whole ecosystem was flawed. And when we stepped back and went, what do we actually need? You want people's attention. You want people to look at your advertising in this cluttered environment and break through. So that was a starting point. It was quite conceptual. So early doors, it was about how do we measure people's attention? And that's still a debate going on today, and a big one, because there are now companies that will measure eye tracking and measure whether people are actually looking at ads and consider that to be attention. So if you're looking at an ad and you're looking at it for longer, that's more attention. There are other companies in the marketplace that will look at the makeup of the ad itself, so the size, the placement, the scroll speed, the click rate, all that kind of stuff, and say, well, someone was paying attention based on those things. So there's still sort of a differing opinion of methodologies. But I think what's kind of happened over the last few years is agency groups and clients have selected their preferred partners, have decided on what they're comfortable with as a definition, and started to really integrate that into our planning processes, into our tools that we're developing. So great example would be standard kind of cross-media reach and frequency planning tool that a planner would use to say how much investment is going to TV versus social versus display, for example, was always based on this view of all the impressions being equal. There's a huge topic of conversation in that room around cross-media measurement, but we know they're not the same. A second view on Facebook versus, let's say, 30 seconds on TV, and then each one of those seconds is powerful in different ways because of the experience, sound, shared experience, size of screen, placement. So just being able to say, we'll move money here because we've reached more people has always been kind of a nonsense. So attention kind of emerged as a way to weight the quality of those exposures and the quality of the media experiences, and that's part of what it's doing now in my world in the agency, is fueling those kind of planning decisions across media channels, but then going super granular into placement level on websites. Is an MPU on the New York Times better than a skyscraper on a different website, for example, and what are we willing to pay for those things? So it's fueling a whole suite of tools that help advertisers, I guess, pick media channels better and more effectively.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think at this point in the conversation, many buyers would say, that's really exciting, but how can I standardize on it?
Yep.
Is that a conversation?
Yeah, again, it was a question in the room. So the question of standardization is interesting, but I don't believe it's necessary. So it becomes necessary if the use of attention metrics is with the JICs or with the currencies. So if Origin or Barb or whoever decide that they want to, Origin's an interesting example in the UK. There's obviously a huge debate around, we can't equate a 1 second view to a 30-second view on TV, and that's the crux of a huge debate. But something like attention as a methodology could be used to level set those two things and say, well, if we can say that someone has been present in front of the ad and they've seen it with their eyes and we've tracked the eyes are on the ad, and the probability of visual attention being paid is X, that's a way of setting a standard in that currency world. So if the conversation is around using attention metrics to kind of augment the JICs in this new kind of space, cross-media, then yes, there's some standardization or at least clarification of what attention is required. But actually where it's being used by the vast majority is a way to understand the quality of media, of the placements that we're buying across different channels and platforms and sites and all sorts of things, and say, is it worth buying? So it's being used as a way to weight the quality of an impression. We've talked about, anyone that's been around in media planning for long enough, or looked at like quality rating points or ways of weighting how effective different media can be. It's kind of a new generation of that. So that 30 seconds versus 1 second piece is fundamentally very, very different. Which one's worth buying and how much is it worth paying for them? So, and I don't think in that space you need standardization, because it's about testing which provider is going to be working better for you. So if you believe that, let's say, Lumen's articulation of attention, and you've tested with it and you've established that when you use that, you buy media that's less wasteful, you can optimize for a better cost, it's driving better outcomes, so you've measured brand lift and business results through that over a long time, that's the right one for you. Likewise, if you've done what Double Verify do, for example, which is using device metrics and that the other side of the fence, and that's driving better results for you and creating less weight, use that. It doesn't really matter. Like, I think you have to have a good testing framework in place and a really good articulation of what the outcomes are that you want to achieve. The pitfalls I see at the moment are teams using attention metrics to try and drive things that aren't really outcomes. So I will optimize to attention because I want clicks. They're fundamentally two very, very different things. That's not how advertising works, right? The purpose of wanting more attention is so that people see the ads you're putting out there, so that it drives those increases in memory and connection to brands. I mean, for Jaguar right now is a great example, right? They've had so much attention. You could call it negative attention, but ultimately there's a lot of people talking about their brand. They weren't after clicks or web visits, right?